Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Football Inc. with myself, Sean Butler of Spurs Talk Show, and Jonny from Twitter fame and now Football Inc. fame, and also Talking Tottenham 1882 on Instagram. Don't worry, we're not here to talk about Tottenham. We are here to talk about all things football. And today's topic is PSR. It's FFP. It's the ridiculousness of Premier League rule makers not being fit for purpose. Another year, another set of shenanigans, another set of eye-rolling, head-scratching from football finance experts all over the game saying, what is going on? The talk of today is Leicester. The talk of today is also Everton from previous breaches that haven't yet been concluded. And, of course, we have to look at the also-rans, the teams that are always in and amongst the overspend conversation that never seem to have any consequences. Jonny, before I ask you what you make of all this stuff and get into the detail, how are you, my man?
I'm all good. You know, it's coming thick and fast, the news, PSR, transfers. This one has been rumbling on, though, for a long, long time. You know, there are clubs that have been preparing legitimately for PSR and FFP, making the whole setup to comply. But really, what is the point? What is the point of it when there's no such thing, really, in reality, that you can manipulate everything to suit yourself? And you know, the rules been set out by the Premier League, not fit for purpose, and they haven't been for a considerable amount of time. And I was kind of shocked today. I've got to be honest. I was shocked that there are no culprits. Really, I mean, how is it possible? It's not possible, in my opinion.
It's possible if you are a body who's not the smartest guys in the room. The lawyers and the rule makers generally are incapable of thinking outside the box. I mean, I don't know how many years of experience now we have to have seen that the smartest minds in the room are employed by the biggest spending clubs to figure out ways to circumvent the rules. The rules were made to be broken, so they say. Not necessarily in football. You don't need to break the rules. You can just dance around them because it's really not that difficult. Before we get into it, guys, we are going to read through a couple of news articles for you and then obviously go on our weave that we do. Jonny and I, we like to just, we'll start in one point and we'll probably just pivot off and we'll find a way to bring it back 360. But before we get into that, guys, if you do enjoy Jonny and I's dialogue, if you do enjoy these sorts of topics, then do get down and smash the like button on the video, hit the subscribe as well. We are a brand new channel. We're trying desperately to get our content up for you and also to bridge through those early stages of content creation. So help us out if you like. If not, well, maybe it's not for you, and you can F off down the Emirates or down Stamford Bridge, wherever you want. It doesn't seem to matter. The rules are equally breakable wherever you go. Jonny, let's get into this one, mate. So are we
going to break the FFP and the PSR rules in this video, are we?
No, we'll just dance around them.
Let's get creative.
100%, mate. So today was the day when we were supposed to hear about any teams that did, in fact, breach any FFP or PSR rules. For those of you who don't know, you're allowed technically to lose £35 million. Actually, it's a lot less than that, but because of secure funding rules, as long as the owner is prepared to demonstrate via paper receipts that they are prepared to use secure funding, then technically you're allowed £105 million over a 3-year rolling period. Right. And this year, like last year, a lot of people were expecting Chelsea because of their insane amounts of money that they spent under Todd Bowley and Clear Lake Capital. We were expecting them. They were the most notable name at the top of the list, as they always are, yet seem to figure out a way to sell, as I always say on my channel, if you can sell your left foot to your right foot and your right foot can lease it back, then it doesn't seem to matter. And Chelsea, once again, did not fall foul of any breaches. Neither did Arsenal, that were another name that were mentioned as a possible culprit. Aston Villa as well, also a name on the list. Didn't happen this year. Teams at the bottom end of the risk category, things like Tottenham Hotspur. Well, look, we're going to talk about that during this segment here, because ultimately, as Tottenham fans, Jonny and I go back and forth around how much incentive is there and how much plaudits and credit should you give to owners like Daniel Levy, who are very clever, very good businessmen, but ultimately are trying to work within the rules. But if it doesn't end up having any teeth anyway, then should you really pat someone on the back for coming second in the Tour de France if Lance Armstrong is juiced up to the eyeballs and can still get away without any drugs tests? Look, this time round, the names that we were thinking about, we were expecting to hear, Jonny, were Leicester City. And they, of course, are a team that have already got around the rules once by taking the Premier League to court, the appellate court, and using their own rules against them and figuring out a way to say, well, actually, part of the reason why we don't believe that this punishment is fair because of last year's 3-year rolling period breach is because they were outside of the Premier League for part of that reporting period, and therefore part of the revenue streams are outside of the jurisdiction of the Premier League and shouldn't be part of the conversation. And that, to me, is the first red flag around the inadequacies and the ineptitude of the Premier League, that they set up rules whereby if you get promoted to the Premier League, then you're not allowed to lose as much money as owners that have been here for the whole 3-year period. But if you get relegated from it, then Leicester City can use a loophole to be able to say, well, you can't judge us because it's outside of your jurisdiction. It's a madness, isn't it, Johnny? An absolute madness.
Well, it's madness. Also, the fact that they broke the Championship rules by overspending, but the Championship couldn't prosecute them because they were no longer in the Championship. They were in the Premier League. Or the fact that they moved their accounting period back a month to let themselves have extra revenue. Listen, the whole thing is an absolute farce. You know, Chelsea selling the hotel to themselves for X million to suck up and, you know, lose all the money. Selling players at the last minute off to Saudi Arabia. I mean, let's be honest, right? There's no, you know, there's no connection between the owners of Newcastle United and Chelsea.
Indirectly, there is.
Indirectly, you know, Newcastle are owned by the Saudi Wealth Fund, and who is the biggest investor in Clear Lake Capital?
I'm not sure they're the biggest. Just to be clear, I think they're up there. They have got indirect investments into Clear Lake Capital.
They're very big, right? Yeah. They're very big investors in Clear Lake Capital. And so they're linked to Saudi Arabia. So the last time they were struggling with the numbers. So what do they do? Quick fly out, Todd Bowley out to Saudi Arabia. And what do we do? Let's go and sell some players.
Aubameyang, who else went out there? There was a few of them, wasn't there? There was about 2 or 3 that suddenly ended up in and got all their money back. Got all their money back.
Overpaid, right? So they weren't in breach of the rules. And, you know, this stuff is going on right in front of our eyes. It's not, you know, it's not being hidden. And what I don't understand is, you know, for my club, you know, we built a stadium to give us the revenue so that we would have the money, so that when PSR and FFP became a thing, we would be in prime position. Waste of time, because it means nothing now. And as you said before, you know, if everyone else is juicing themselves up to win the race, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to keep it clean, you're going to be left behind, buddy. You're going to be left behind. You know, and listen, these are small ones, but if we flip over to Barcelona, what's going on over there, you know, they can't even lodge that Almo and Roque and others. And yet suddenly, out of the blue, having sold off their image rights, their TV rights, they look in the cupboard. What else have we got? Oh, I know. Let's sell the right, but to a stadium that hasn't even been built.
Yeah, VIP box seats to a stadium that hasn't been built is absolutely out of this world new one. Even Todd Bowley's looking at that one going, pretty good.
Stadium,
Fair play. I mean, it's almost becoming a game of creative. Well, it's always been a game of creative accounting, but now it's a game of like cat and mouse of who can be the most ridiculous with the most creative kind of legal ramifications or legal just sort of whatever you call it, shenanigans, shall we call them? Look, listen, it is what it is, right? I don't hold any resentment towards the chairman that want to do it the right way. I think you should have. I've been saying it for ages. I think you should give them a pat on the back for trying to do within the rules, expecting that the rules were there to be actually upheld, enforced, and abided by, and expecting that if they're not, then there should be, overarching consequences. But after a while, you look at teams like Everton, and you probably, as an Everton fan, you're probably thinking, well, Moshiri, not a great owner, obviously spent a hell of a lot of money walking away with a £600 million, I think it is, hole in his pocket. MSP Capital, the £100 million that got put in there for the stadium thing. Where's that kind of black hole gone? And obviously, ultimately, they faced, I think, 10-point deduction in the end for 2 breaches over the same reporting period. Everton fans at the time thinking, this isn't right. How do we do that? But at the same time, for what it's worth, not in defence of Everton, and actually the other side, I think that there's also reasons to look at that whole situation and go, well, if you're going to half enforce the rules, you should go the whole way. And with regards to Stefan BORSON, football finance expert, he's come out today and called it absolutely ridiculous that they haven't even got to the bottom. The Premier League hasn't even announced a closure, the findings of the information regarding the debt, the interest on the loans for the stadium that should have also been a participation in their this year's wiggle room and their this year's 3-year reporting period. No noise, no news from the Premier League. It's embarrassing on so many fronts, but I don't hold, as I said at the start of this little rant here, Johnny, I don't hold any resentment towards owners that are smart enough to figure it out and that have the ambition, have the deep pockets and have the patience to be able to throw caution to the wind, knowing that they're just smarter than the guys that are enforced. It's always a game of cat and mouse. It's like anything in life. The criminals are always one step ahead of the enforcement. And I guess it's no different. Not that I'm calling these people criminals, but it's no different in terms of the chairman. They are looking for ways to circumvent. You've got to feel a little bit sorry if you're a Newcastle United fan. They've got more money, Johnny, than in the ground and ready to spend than I think there's ever been printed in the existence of mankind. But yet they are sticking by the rules and they are held by these nonsense barriers to entry that seemingly only ever seem to curtail the ambitions of some, but never seem to matter for others. What's your take, mate, on it? There's so many different stories here. We could talk about this for hours. There's Everton, there's Leicester, there's Newcastle, there's Barcelona, there's Tottenham that are doing it the right way, but not being beneficiaries of it. Where can we go with this one? Weave away.
Spurs have been restricted by the fact of the cost of our build. Now, if you consider that the stadium build, material costs and everything before COVID were here, and since COVID, raw materials, labour, fuel has gone through the roof.
Not just that, there was a commodities boom just before COVID happened as well. So, it didn't help that either.
So we have ended up with a large debt.
Massive
luckily
debt,
for us, 675 million of that debt was restructured over 25 years with Daniel at 2.75%, Bank of America. There is a little bit of that left over, which is on a higher interest rate. My point here is that Everton Stadium would have been costing significantly more per square foot to build.
Yeah.
And the debt will be repaid at a much higher interest rate. The interest rates at the time of building our stadium and building their stadium is wildly different. So I've got no idea how, when they worked out this PSR and FFP, how their stadium debt has not been taken into account here and looked at.
No, I think the stadium debt itself isn't a problem. That goes down as infrastructure spend, so that's not a problem. It's the interest. It's the interest on the loans that there's a blue line, some sort of like blurred line as to where that money came from and what part of it is actually football related versus infrastructure. So it's and that's what I'm saying. The Premier League hasn't even come around with a final answer yet. So it's crazy.
So do you not think when the American owner came in and knew what the situation was, he's seen the books, he's seen the debt, he knows the rules.
It's this Friedkin group you're talking about.
Yeah, the Friedkin group.
Yeah.
How was this deal structured to enable them to circumvent this very issue? Where
that won't, as far as I'm aware, the Friedkin group that only happened a couple of months ago. So
yeah, it does.
That won't be affecting this particular
whether
reporting
period. Over the debt, how he's
restructuring
the debt on that, or whether he's taking a lot of the hit of the debt and the debt's not being passed on to the club.
Either way, I don't think that stuff affects this particular reporting period, because this particular reporting period is 22 to 20, 21, 22 to 23, 24. So
23, 24, right?
So yes, it's the Mashiri sort of tenure really is what's under scrutiny. But like I say, for me, Everton are the smallest fry. Not that it should matter. The rules should be the same. No one's above the law. I guess where I want to go with it, mate, look, we can see here, because we haven't got the details. We haven't got the detail of Chelsea's accounts yet. We don't have the detail of most of the team. So we can't really chew over the final. All we can do is wait and see. But ultimately, to me, it's when you look at Barcelona, what they're doing, and that's, like I say, it's within the rules to sell future funding, right? That you can raise revenues now. It's like anything. It's like a forwards contract on the in the commodities market or whatever else. You can raise revenue now by selling future products and services.
Well,
With coffee, you can do it with orange juice. You can do it with anything you want. So why can't you do it with VIP seating? It's like, to me, it's laughable. But ultimately, what it comes down to is like, are the Premier League, are the UEFA rule makers, are they ever going to get their head around this system whereby the rules are considerate and have considered all of the potential loopholes? Like, Jonny, last year, I think it was early last summer, you and I did a stream on my channel, and we talked about the 10 ways that haven't yet been loopholed that could easily happen. And one of the scenarios we talked about was what happens in a world where two teams that are both up against it sell a player to each other that's valued at £5 million a piece on the books, but they sell it at £50 million, for example. Especially if they're young players, you'll get the FFP wiggle room or the PSR wiggle room on the amortization on the outgoing player, but you'll get the revenue back in immediately on the books. And lo and behold, about 90 minutes later, it literally happened between between Villa and Newcastle.
And you know what? You can't prove it. You cannot prove in a court of law that
how to value someone. It's values in the eye of the beholder, right? It's there in the eye of the beholder. You can sit there and say the players,
but you only
valuable to us. Yeah.
He's only worth 5. Well, we think he's worth 50 because we think he's going to be a huge future talent. You cannot prove that. You cannot disprove that in a court of law that he's not worth that money. I'm sorry.
I mean, they've got these third-party transactions, whatever they're called, alternative ATPs. I think they're called. And it's one of the things that Manchester City are up against in the 115 charges, which is where we're going to move to right now. But those things where you can't have companies that are sort of indirectly related to the company that is the owner of the club, sponsoring the team or sponsoring the football club or an area of it like a stadium for outside of the realms of reason levels. And that's one of the things that the Manchester City are accused of doing. Again, though, there's wiggle room within that because, let's say, for example, Newcastle United were to go and get a sponsor from a company that has a indirect relationship. It doesn't have to be part of the PIF fund. It could be, someone that's just, completely separate, but yet one of the other companies that are within the PIF fund could make a deal away from football that makes them better on the other side. Either way, you can't maybe sort of structure these deals that are obscenely overvalued, but ultimately it's going to be easy to be able to say, well, look, I can justify a high value because Newcastle are a team that are going to have this money. They're going to have the infrastructure spend. And so what I'm buying into now is actually a future valuation based on a better stadium, based on a club that is going places, based on yada, yada, yada. And so to me, like, I don't know, like where the rubber meets the road, Jonny, is the rules aren't fit for purpose. And if you and I can come up with 10 potential loopholes, and neither of us are gazillionaire lawyers that are paid to figure this stuff out, but if we can figure it out and then 90 minutes later, that's exactly what transpires, it's going to be super easy for these smart people in boardrooms around the biggest clubs in the world to always be able to find loopholes. And so if that's the case, do you shake hands with it and say, like, get rid of it all, and then it's a race to the bottom, who's got the deepest pockets wins? Or do you stick to the plan and try to figure it out, but know that it's never going to really happen?
I think football will be finished if we just take our foot off and just say, do what you want. You might be, if you're Newcastle or Man City, be all for it, but that's the death of football, personally, I think. It
kind of has been already, mate. Like Chelsea and Manchester City were nowhere 20 years ago, were they? 25 years ago. And then Abramovich came in and just completely changed the game.
We're closing the door after the horse is bolted. That's what's happened. But it doesn't mean you can't close the door now. If you want to leave the door open forevermore, I think football's dead. Right. I really do think you close the loopholes, you make the rules the rules. Look, what Man City have done, right? I was discussing this ages ago. When you have these PIF funds or whatever national funds, they have so many companies within these funds, QSI, QIA, right? That you can buy up a football club and have one of your subsidiaries offer them to be sponsors and play ridiculously over the odds.
As long as it's within reason, you can,
but Man City didn't do that. They did it ridiculously over the odds.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and that's why they're potentially going to get in trouble. I mean,
it's fraud. What they were doing was fraud. The thing I have the biggest exception with is the fraud. Paying managers on sub accounts in different places, showing one amount of money you're paying him, but really you're paying him something else somewhere.
But Jonny,
else.
but that is not a thing that started with Manchester City. In fairness, right? How many times have we heard over the years, Real Madrid, for example, they can't sign a 10-year-old on a professional contract, but in order to get the player in, they sign the parent as a scout and give him £500,000 a year as a way to make the job juice
I
right.
Understand that, but that's not what we're talking here about Manchester City.
Well, it's the same principle, though, isn't it? It's the same principle. At the end of the day, it's a way around the rules. It's a way around the legal ability for employment, and yet you're still securing the services of a future world star potentially by convincing them to come now. And parents, especially
they broke
bad backgrounds or poor backgrounds, can.
Forget the 113 charges. Forget the 113 charges here. For me, there's probably 3, and the 3 charges are they false amount for the amount of money that coming in from sponsorship, not declaring the amount of money that you're paying. Look, I just think that they're saying that we shouldn't be punished because someone hacked in and stole the fraudulent information that we were hiding within our computer system, right? Yep. Therefore, you had no right to go into our computers and found all the disgusting and dodgy, illegitimate things that we've been doing. Therefore, you cannot charge us. I'm sorry, that is all right. But it might start.
It's probably a defence, though. That let's be honest. If Leicester can wriggle out of their problems,
well, that's the defence they've gone with. Look, they can't relegate. They can't relegate Man City. They don't have the powers. What they do have, though, is the power to deduct them 80 points,
which is the equivalent of, right? But ultimately, what that means is for getting away with 12 years or whatever it is, 8 years of success, that isn't going to get stripped. There's not going to be any asterisks. No one's going to look back and remember this in 50 years' time. But when you look back at the annals of history and you see Manchester City's name on all those cups for all that time, then they're going to be,
Look at Rangers. Look at Glasgow Rangers. They got thrown out of the Scottish Premier League and ended up in the 4th division.
Right.
That's the punishment. That's a serious punishment.
But the Premier League doesn't have the right to do that. So at best, Manchester City are going to get relegated to the Championship, and in 12 months' time, they're going to be back, which is probably why they're going out and buying players like Kuzanov and the fella Race from, get ahead of it now. At best, you're going to spend 1 year. Well, don't worry, we'll send you out on loan anyway, so you won't have to worry about going to Macclesfield Town on a Thursday night or whatever. You haven't got to worry about that. We'll send you out to Lyon on loan.
Here's the answer. Here's a question, sorry. If by some freak, I can't see it at the current form, but if by some freak of nature, Manchester City went on to get a points deduction and relegation, and they went on to win the Champions League, right?
Yeah.
Would they be allowed, would UEFA allow them to compete in the Champions League next season? But see, my argument is absolutely no, they should not. And they
will, though.
Yeah, but they shouldn't be, should they?
But didn't that happen with, was it Swansea or Wigan who won the, forget now, there was the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup? They got relegated the same year, I believe, as they won the Cup. So they were competing in Europe whilst playing in the Championship.
No, but I'm talking about found guilty of,
right.
AC Milan banned from Europe for breaching the financial fair play.
Didn't Juve take it? Oh, we'll sacrifice the Conference League or something, wasn't it? Was that last season or the season? I can't remember.
But what I don't understand is UEFA were threatening Chelsea that they weren't going to be in the league because they breached their rules, which is a different set of rules.
And they said it's probably better. I mean, it didn't end up mattering, but there was talk, wasn't there, last year about them saying, well, we'd rather just not be participating because then we get held to that 90% threshold or 80% threshold of revenue on net squad spend. And so it's better for them to do it, to not be in, because in the Premier League, there was a higher threshold at that particular point in time. It didn't end up mattering, but the intention there is it's insane.
What's going to end up happening is, instead of being thrown out for breaking the rules of UEFA rules, they're probably going to end up now going and winning the bloody competition. Right? All the rules. I mean, it's just laughable.
It is laughable, mate. It is laughable. Look, ultimately, I guess the last question for you, though, is just, I know that this isn't a Tottenham channel, but like Daniel Levy is probably the, just quickly, just to round off, like when you were saying about this idea of like you could rob Peter to pay Paul amongst the ownerships, different companies. I think we're at the stage now whereby every single team in the Premier League, at least, is owned by some sort of billionaire, some sort of conglomerate, some sort of multi-club model. And so, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're talking about Manchester City with the third-party transactions, if we're talking about potentially, Newcastle United, Chelsea, whatever, with Saudi Arabia, Aston Villa with their Egyptian, the North African links. Ultimately, you look at a team like Tottenham Hotspur, who have tried to do things by the rules, but at the same time are, probably naive at best, foolish at worst, whatever, to think that they were going to get employed. But if I'm Daniel Levy, it might not be part of his makeup, but you look at ENIC, you look at Tavistock above them, the same things can happen. We just choose not to do it. So if you are a fan of a club that hasn't yet been accused of doing the things that are probably rife in some of the other teams, are you looking to your owner now and saying, okay, stop playing by the rules, start conducting your business within the dark arts, fair play for doing it legitimately, but get creative, because it's the only way we can compete. Because let's be honest, the Premier League and the FIFA and the UEFA boys are just not good enough at thinking about all of the creative loopholes that the guys who are paid suits in the boardrooms of these clubs are. And therefore, if I'm a fan of Tottenham, which I am, I'm starting to look at Daniel Levy and saying, okay, cool, time to change track, time to employ someone who's a little bit sneaky and figure things out, because it's the only way that you can close the gap is to start leasing your right hand back to your left after selling it for 100 million.
Well, it's kind of ironic that ENIC started off on a multi-club ownership model, Slavia Prague and the other club, and to buy Spurs and Rangers, and to get Spurs, they had to sell all their other assets. It's kind of ironic that we're now dealing with, people who are involved in the Premier League who own multiple clubs, Chelsea being one of them as well. So
yeah, I've got no problem with multi-club ownership. I do have a problem with this idea that you've seen across Europe, that Red Bull Leipzig and Red Bull Salzburg are allowed to compete in the same competition because there's a Chinese wall between the two clubs and they have two distinctly different management groups, although they ultimately go up to the top. But just the fact that there's never been two clubs with the highest frequency of trade between each other as Salzburg and Leipzig have, that in and of itself should be evidence that the rules are ridiculous when it comes to conflicts of interest. And look, I forget the guy's name who runs UEFA. He's already said he wants to loosen the rules again. So you're going to see more and more multi-club ownership. You're going to see more and more conflicts. You're going to see more and more head scratching from people that are going, what are we doing here? Like, why are we making it easier for the wealthiest to to use their money to essentially create a competitive imbalance? And I'm okay with, if we just call a spade and move away from it, fine, as long as you know where we are. But this idea that there is no conflicts, this idea that the rules are there and they will be upheld and adhered to, the only teams that we've seen hit by this are Nottingham Forest. And let's be honest, Nottingham Forest, Johnny, the only reason they fell foul was because it was in their interests to wait a week so that Daniel Levy would overpay for Brennan Johnson by 12 million. Had they accepted a 12 million pound bid lower or whatever it was from Brentford, then they would have been on the right side of PSR, but on the wrong side of what's the best interest profitability wise for their club. And isn't that what this is about? Sustainability. So isn't bringing in more money a better outcome? And yet, no, according to the rules, Nottingham Forest breach, therefore points deduction. Everton's a different story, reckless overspend. But I don't know. I think the whole thing's just embarrassing on every part, Look,
if it was all bets are off, Newcastle would just go and buy every single player. They would be buying Mbappe, this one, that one. It would be like the Harlem Globetrotters, be game over. And, whether you support Spurs, Wolves, and whatever other club, you're never going to see anything again. It's just going to be...
Until you sell out to people that are similar, right?
Well, it's hard to
do you want the Premier...
It's hard to imagine that. You know, when you look at the NFL and their balanced model, yes, you still have certain teams that dominate, but the way they're set up there with
the draft,
the drafts and everything is to try and balance it off. You know, the team that done the worst has the first draft, you know, in the next season to try and rebalance everything. And I just feel that it's not like they can't spend any money, Sean. You can still spend money. All we're asking is that we don't want someone to come in, you know, and blow them away. You know, Man City might be all, you know, like they are now, and Liverpool and Chelsea or what have you. But if Newcastle are just allowed to go and buy whoever they want and spend as much as they want, they'll be left behind.
Well, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that Newcastle United are. I mean, it's a threat, right? It's a risk to the competitive imbalance. But ultimately, if I'm a Newcastle United fan, I'm furious right now because they are doing things by the rules. They are not cheating. They haven't done any of these things, as far as I'm aware, that these other clubs have done. And yet, if anyone could, you'd think that they would, but they haven't done that. And so, fair play to Newcastle for having all the money, but having their, you know, at the moment, I guess having the pockets zipped up or whatever, or locked tight. I think that they're trying to do the right thing. For me, my anguish, my ire, my anger, my frustration is not really with the clubs. It's not with the fans, certainly not. And it's certainly not with most of the owners. It's with the Premier League rule makers. Like, if you're going to set rules, fucking figure it out. Like, it doesn't, like I said at the start, Johnny, if you and I could come up with 10 rules and ways and loopholes, and one of them was utilized about an hour later, like, these guys, you better believe that they have 100 other mechanisms up their sleeve that are just waiting to tap into, because that's what they're employed to do these things, and they're smart people. And I just think that the Premier League, UEFA, etc., it's all good having the intentions. I don't know if there's corruption going on where people are getting backhanders. I'm not going to sit here and suggest that there are, but either way, it's ineptitude at the highest level, and it makes the whole thing just a big song and dance, and it's embarrassing. And look, for someone like myself who has spent the last 2 years talking about how great it's going to be for Tottenham when PSR and FFP has its bite, I look a little bit silly because it hasn't happened.
Well, I mean, look, all I know is in the last 8-10 months, thousands of hours of YouTube channels, God knows how many hundreds and hundreds of articles in Athletics, The Guardian, all the newspapers, articles about the breach. This one's teetering on the edge. This one's in trouble. That's in trouble. This is going to happen. And at the end of it, it's a damn squib and no one's charged. You know, just yesterday I was listening to a stream regarding it and nothing's happened. I'm sorry. It's not believable. Next thing we're going to hear is what's going to happen with Man City, and for the credibility of the Premier League.
What credibility, mate? What credibility?
Yeah, no, if they're going to have any molecule of credibility,
you know what's going to happen? They're going to get charged. They'll get found guilty, and then Manchester City will tie that up in an appellate court for the next couple of years. So nothing's going to happen there either. Maybe in 2027-28 season, maybe Manchester City will be relegated. Like I said, all their best players by then will probably be shipped out on loan for a year. You won't see all the superstars down in the Championship playing on a Thursday night in Stoke. You won't see that. You'll just see a bunch of youth players that are coming through. And by the way, Manchester City obviously have got an incredible access to all that talent because of their multi-club ownership, which started by their ability to get ahead of the rules long before the rules were ever really invented. And like I say, it's a short-term slap on the wrist for probably the better part of a decade's worth of rule breaking. And if you're someone that has all the resources anyway, all of the success, all of the access to talent, and you still have to cheat, it's not really something that I look at favorably. But like I say, for me, I just blame the rule makers. Figure it out or don't bother, because it's
Can I ask a question? If you get a chance to hit in the comment section here, if it transpires that Manchester City are found guilty and they deducted the 70, 80 points, whatever, that relegates them, will Arsenal sue Manchester City and claim that they won the title that season?
Well, it'll be interesting.
I would like to know, because
Mikel Arteta he'd be torn, right? Because Mikel Arteta loves to find an excuse. If it's not the ball, if it's the whatever, he loves to find an excuse as to why he's not responsible. But will he be torn? Because ultimately, if he does, he goes, "It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace."
He was part of it.
Yeah, he was part of it, exactly. So he's like torn. Like, wait a minute, if I'm pushing for Arsenal, I'm losing my own previous track record trophies. Listen, that's a story for another day, mate. We've been going 35 minutes. I think that's probably a good time to end. This is not the first or last. Well, this is the first time on this channel, but it's not the last time we will be talking about PSR, FFP, football finance, multi-club ownership. We've got so much content coming. We've got like 95 different topics we want to talk about. We'll be banging them out thick and fast 2 times a day, hopefully, for you guys. So if you at least enjoy the conversation, and by the way, forgive us if any of the specifics of what we said might not be necessarily 100. If you're someone that's super close to Chelsea, Newcastle, whatever, like we're going off what we've read, and we're not as close to your clubs as you guys are. So please forgive if it's not 100% accurate. We try our best to get as close to the mark as possible. But Jonny, finish us off, mate. How are we going to round off today's video?
Oh, listen, let's just hope that that the Premier League get a hold of this nonsense, because it's an embarrassment, right? Just get the rules in place. If you breach the rules, work out a table of how many points you're going to get deducted so that they can't take you to a court and appeal. It's black and white. That's what it needs to be, black and white. If you do X, you will be deducted points. This is the scale, right? If you overshoot by X, these are the amount of points. And if you commit fraud and you try to lie and do stuff like that, then, you know, the punishment is even more serious, which is where Man City are at the moment. But I just want to see us move on, because we should be talking about football and what goes on the pitch, and less so of what's going on financially off the pitch. But at Football Inc., we'll be talking about everything. So whether it's VAR controversy, referee controversy, money transfers, different stuff going on at football clubs and players and the shenanigans, that's what we'll be talking about from here on in. That's why it's called Football Inc., incorporating everything.
Love it, Jonny. Thanks very much, guys. Like, subscribe and comment. Let us know how we've done, and we'll see you on the next one. As always, bye-bye.